Hi everyone, Materim here with my first army book review for the Ninth Age. I've decided to start with the Saurian Ancients army book, and the reason for that is I have decided to take them to my first non-Brawlers Bash tournament. So I think going through the army book and kind of talking about it will not only get my impressions out there, but also help me kind of think about the book and find a good way to tackle it for building a good list for this tournament. So I'm not going to go super in depth in terms of the Army Special Rules. There's three of them. The two good ones are Cold-Blooded and Born Predator, so you get that extra D6 on the leadership tests and discard the highest. And Born Predator gives your Saurus-based guys the ability to reroll natural ones to hit in close combat. They also have Telepathic Link, which, I don't know. It basically lets you swap spells with... Or no, it lets you target through... with your Quaddle, lets you target spells through them, or through the models with Telepathic Link. I've never personally found it all that useful, but maybe that's me playing it badly. The big problem is when I take a Quaddle, I don't really have points for a lot of the other casters that have Telepathic Link, so I haven't really found it super important. And I'm not really going to go through the magical items either. There's basically two, in my opinion, that are good. The rest of them are situational at best. The Spear of the Stampede for 80 points is a lance, and the Wielder's Mount gains impact hits plus D6. We'll talk about that a little bit when we get into the Taurus Or, but I'm at the edge of declaring this particular item an auto-include. It's just that good, in my opinion. The other item that I'm finding very, very useful is the Jade Staff. Having the ability to have healing waters from Druidism as a bound spell is pretty good. I've been using it quite a bit and I like it. So with those things set aside, let's start talking about the actual options and see kind of what I think. So the first in the characters section is the Firstborn. These are your Saurus characters. They both start with an innate defense +5, Cold-Blooded and Born Predator. You can go with the Warlord for 260 points or the Veteran for 180. While I have in the past used these on foot, the general consensus appears to be put them on Saurus and make them cowboys, which is certainly effective. I do, however, think that because those are so good, it kind of lets folks easily ignore how good they can be on foot. They're very tough. I mean, you're looking at Strength 5, Toughness 5, and it doesn't take all that much to get them to a good armor save. They can buy shield, light armor, or heavy armor if on foot. And they can go with a pretty wide variety of weapons. Halberds, paired weapons, lance, spear, and great weapon. And then, of course, they've got mount choices, Raptor, Carnosaur, or the Alpha Carnosaur if you take the Warlord. Certainly the Raptors are probably what gets most play, although you do see in folks who want to stretch with a Monster Mash going with the Alpha Carnosaur a lot. I have seen more lists lately that go with a pair of normal Carnosaurs. I don't know how keen I am on that just due to the Frenzy being introduced. It adds a certain level of danger to that particular choice that I don't know that I would go with. But I have been having a lot of fun with the Alpha Carnosaur build, mainly because, I mean, the D3 multiple wounds on the Carnosaur is just absolutely abusive. And the Apex Predator thing is actually pretty good if you're targeting a model with Towering Presence or with the Fly Special Rule, or a single model with the Fly Special Rule. They get +2 modifier to their charge range, so it's basically like being movement 9 on the charge, which can really surprise your opponent, I find. But I'm definitely a big fan of the Firstborn. I probably take them more, me personally, I probably take them more for the Warlord for the Alpha Carnosaur. But in general, what I see a lot of folks taking is veterans for the Cowboys, which is certainly good. You throw them on a Raptor. It's very easy to get them to a very high armor save. You go great weapon, and they're punching like strength 6 attacks. Can do a lot of damage. And with the cold-blooded, they're hard to break. So next we go into the magic characters. First and foremost is the Quaddle Lord. He starts off as a Wizard Master, 4 spells, and a ward save of 4 up. For only 500 points. So seems like a lot, but with the right lores, I think you could make it work. The other big benefit of the Quaddle Lord is that for 100 points, he can become your Battle Standard Bearer and your General. Can get up to 200 points of magic items, and up to 300 points of the Quaddle Lord disciplines, which I'll talk about in a minute. He also has the Palanquin rule, so if you drop him in a unit of Temple Guard, you can put him wherever he wants, and he can't be chosen as the model to refuse a challenge, which is pretty good. It helps to keep him protective, although that rule in and of itself, plus the way the Temple Guard are built, kind of pigeonholes them, but we'll talk about that a little later. So the 4 lores that we choose, I'm not actually going to get into those right now because I'm going to do a separate video where I talk about the 4 lores that they can take. Well, I guess all the magic that the Saurian Ancients can take, and kind of talk about my thoughts on the various lores. So, but the Quaddle Lord disciplines are very interesting. There's up to 200 points of those that you can take. Some of the big ones that I personally have liked taking before, I like the Wisdom of the Ancients, get you an extra learn spell, particularly in some of those lores where you really want all the spells. For instance, Pyromancy. I've had a great deal of enjoyment using that. Beyond that, though, I haven't been using them very much. I occasionally use the Wellspring of Power, but somebody recently pointed out to me that basically for the same effect, you can pay less points and get the book from the magic items. So I guess I would only really use that if I had another magic item I wanted to use. The Jade Staff comes to mind. But other than that, I think the big thing for me personally is they're just kind of expensive, and I don't really see the big benefit of sinking even more points in a wizard who starts off at 500 points. And there he is. Sorry, I was forgetting to change. But yes, I'm going through and showing these images of my army that I've painted, so you guys can kind of see what I'm looking at when I think about this stuff. And I was dumb and forgot to click over before we started talking about them. So let's proceed on with the Skink Captain. Now, I love the Skink Captain. 80 points. I mean, he's a 2-wound character, so you're not going to get much out of him, but for 80 points, how much do you really need to make him fun? He starts with a blowpipe, innate defense 6, light armor, cold-blooded, and water strider. Can be your battle standard bearer, magic items up to 100, can take a shield, can actually ride a pterodon, an alpha pterodon, an alpha rampedon, or a Taurus Orb, which is where I've been getting a lot of fun from lately, is putting him on a big Taurus Orb and just cramming him down people's throats. He's a good option on that Taurus Orb for the Spear of the Stampede, because then you've got 2d6 plus 1 impact hits that can be rerolled due to the Taurus Orb's benefit. The Taurus Orb Sharp Horns, super awesome. The other thing I've been enjoying doing, just as kind of a goof, you have him off by his own and you give him the Axe of Battle, so he's just this little one dude who gets 6 attacks. And movement 6, he's not bad for like rushing up on chaff and just beating them all to death with 6 attacks. I don't know if that's a common tactic that I could use, but it's very surprising when you don't expect him to output that kind of damage. So I'm a big fan. So next is the Skink Priest. He is, again, 130 points for skink stats. 2 wounds is the big problem here. And more importantly, 2 toughness. So miscasts are going to just bend him over the staff that he's carrying there. Starts with innate defense 6, cold-blooded water strider. He has the telepathic link and is a wizard apprentice without the ability to become a wizard master. So the Saurians are interesting in that you have one unit that the Quaddle that is your wizard master and can't be an apprentice, and you've got one unit, the Skink Priests, who are the opposite, who can be the apprentice but not the master. Also, the Skink Priests can only get up to 3 spells, so they're definitely designed to be a support magic caster and not your main one. Though I have, through the use of bound spells in the items, used them to pretty decent effect as a primary caster just because of the cheapness. You get a little bit of that bonus, particularly in Druidism, but I'll go into the lores in the other video. And you can put him on a Taurus Orb as well, which is, again, awesome. Though I don't know how much I would recommend it, mainly because I think your Taurus Orb mount is used better to bubble out your BSB aura rather than just run around with a priest on the back of it. He can also take a skink palanquin, which basically gives him the palanquin rule and gives him an extra wound and an extra toughness, because it's a little 50 by 50 mount base that can go in a unit of Saurians or Skink Braves, as long as they don't contain Caimans. Next page, it talks a little bit about some of the mounts for the skinks. I know these aren't skinks, but it's the only mount picture I had ready. Alpha Pterodon is basically an expensive flying fast cav. Can drop rocks. Speed 9, which is the big benefit there if you want to use them to go hunt war machines, could be beneficial. The Alpha Rampedon is basically the more combat-oriented of the flying mounts. It's a little slower, but it's got Frenzy, Lethal Strike, Armor Pierce, and the Prey Scent ability that we'll talk about when we get to the Rampedons. I'll be honest, I haven't tried the Pterodon yet, but the Rampedon for the character really hasn't been a big deal to me. I haven't really gotten a lot of use out of it, so I'm more inclined to not take them. Unless somebody can come up with a good, solid argument why I should reconsider. Next is the Taurus Orb, which is just a beast. Strength 6, toughness 6, 6 wounds, crazy impact hits that can be re-rolled. 4 crew with poison javelins on the back of them, just for some extra fun shooting. Innate defense 3 is pretty awesome. All on movement 6, which is great. You also get a giant blowpipe, which is basically a little poison organ gun. Or you can switch it out for a great bow for 20 points or Engines of the Ancient for 80 points. And Engine of the Ancients we'll talk about a little bit later, but is great because it gives you a lot of options and a good way of shielding and protecting a good hunk of your unit or your army without spending too many points. And I already talked about the Palanquin a little earlier. Of those 4, the Taurus Orb is absolutely the winner. The only thing is you can only have one mount with that, so it's kind of up to you whether you want to use it for your Skink BSB or your or your Skink Priest. As I said earlier, I lean towards the BSB. So last character, and I don't have a picture of this, is the Cayman Ancient. I'm just going to sum it up. It's garbage. 245 points for a lackluster monstrous infantry character. It gives a unit of Caimans that's in an extra point of weapon skill, but I don't really care. It doesn't bring enough to make its point value worth it. I'd rather spend the points on getting an extra Cayman or 2, because I think that would in the long run be better. But again, if somebody has a super compelling reason why I'm mistaken, certainly leave them in the comments. But It's really just a slightly buffed Cayman is really all it is, and I don't see much of a benefit to it. All right, so now we're going to talk about what I consider the biggest, I don't want to say failing, but the biggest missed opportunity of the Saurian Ancients book. And I think that's their core. Right now, they basically have two, we'll call it 2.5 choices for core. The first being Saurian Warriors. I like the Saurian Warriors a lot. They've got a couple of huge glaring weaknesses, mainly being a terrible weapon skill and a terrible initiative. But starting with an innate defense 5 and a shield, with the cold-blooded and born predator, you can upgrade them with spears for 1 point per model, and you can give them animal totems for 2 points per model, which I think lets you kind of choose how you want them to perform. Now, the downside is you gotta choose the same totem for every Saurus in the army, which I think is pretty dumb. It's another one of those, we don't want any invisible upgrades arguments, which I think is BS, particularly since there's so many neat banner polls and stuff that come that you can get out there that could very easily designate which versions you have on which. But you can give Piranha, which gains fear, the Serpent, which is the one I love to do, which gains fight and extra ranks. Most people seem to swear by the Jaguar, though, which gives +1 movement. And Crocodile, I never see anybody use. It basically against attacks against these models have their armor piercing value reduced by 1. I guess it could be good. I've never used it myself. I would much rather take my big brick of Saurus and get my extra attacks, but that's just me personally. Though I do think, just from what I've seen, Jaguar is in general more popular, but that's not the way I tend to go personally. So your next option is Skink Braves. They're 15 Braves to start. You can get them up to, 40? They're cheap. They're garbage in combat. But you can give them Poison Javelins for 6 points a model, which I think is excessive. You can give them, you can replace their shields with bows, which I haven't had a chance to play with a lot, but I certainly think that may be a good option, just to put that many shots in the air. The downside is you're still limited to 40 models with bows. Even though you can take 4 units of these Skink Braves, you're essentially limited to only 1 max size unit having bows. Again, the balancing argument that lizards shouldn't have that much shooting. But yeah. This is also where the 0.5 of the 2.5 core choices come in, because you can add 1 Cayman to a skink unit for every 10 skinks at 90 points a model. These are just like the Caymans that are in the special section, and they're good. I mean, toughness 4, strength 5 with halberds to start off with, so strength 6 is just solid. The big problem is they kind of brought the rule over from the Lizardmen from old Warhammer, where you can add them together, and it just makes it complicated. I don't like it just because, because I built all of my skinks back when you really only took them skirmishing, and now they don't fit together well with Caymans is problem 1. But problem 2, it's just complicated, and it's one less. If I leave them at home, the Skink Cayman units, if I leave them at home, it's one less thing I have to deal with during the game. And so that laziness has overridden any tactical use for me. Of the two, in my opinion, Taurus Warriors went out hands down in the core. They're tough. Strength 4, toughness 4, and they're great bricks. Though a lot of people seem to be interested in taking them in multiple small units of like 10, the minimum lately. I just like big units because I like seeing at least 20 big old Saurus bricks 20-man Briggoldsaurus bricks on the table. My spear group is usually 32 models with the serpent upgrade and spears. So a lot of attacks if they can survive for it. So next we get into special. And we start off with the Temple Guard. These guys start off in units of 15. You can add up to a total of 30. They're not badly costed. They are basically Saurus warriors with 1 extra point of weapon skill and halberds and light armor, innate defense 5, and a shield. So they're like 3 armor if you're being shot at, 4 in close combat, which isn't terrible. They get bodyguard for the general, they're immune to psych and scoring. Standard upgrades, and they can take a magical standard up to 100 points. The big problem is that they're designed to be a defensive unit protecting the Quaddle Lord, but they also have a lot of offensiveness, which you don't necessarily want to trust the Quaddle Lord that close to combat, depending upon your build. So they're kind of a weird unit. I take them sometimes. I usually will take them when I have a Quaddle Lord, mainly because I only own 20, so I just take the 20 and drop the Quaddle Lord in the back and be happy with it. I don't really see a lot of people playing with them, though. And I certainly don't see them, like, I don't know that I've ever seen a 30-man brick of them. I may be wrong and have just overlooked it, but in general, they're considered kind of a lackluster option. Next up, before I get to the actual picture here, Raptor Riders are next. They're the quote-unquote heavy cab of the Saurian Ancients. They look okay on paper until you get to the initiative and realize that you're going to take a 10-man brick into something that's pretty much going to get slaughtered before it gets to go. So they're not great. I occasionally will take a 5-man of them, which is all I've got, to just use as a bunker for a cowboy for a minute or two. But in general, I tend to leave them in the box. Then we go into the Caimans, which is actually my newest unit that I've bought, is these 5 Caimans you see here. I really had underestimated these guys. The strength 6 is awesome. Yeah, it's initiative 2, so you got to be careful. You can't run them into everything like you can ogres and expect them to come out half decent. But they can output a lot of damage. They can hurt, in my experience. They can go after monsters. They might have a little trouble catching the flying ones, but I've tossed them into ground pounder monsters and done pretty good. And I just like them. I think they're cool, high strength. It's another good option to deal with high armor save dudes. Although with my tendency to take a giant brick of spearmen, most cavalry aren't a problem for me. But I've been using them more and more, and I very much like them. You start off with 3, can get up to 10 total for 210 to start and 90 points a model. Pretty solid, all things considered. And also, if you want to go with what may be a little overkill, you can go ahead and swap out halberds for great weapons at 8 points a pop, and just forget about the initiative thing anyway. My reasoning for liking the halberds is that it makes them a good target to hunt other great weapon wielding figures and units, because they'll come in with those halberds at strength 6 and just beat the crap out of something, and they'll take a few lumps back from whatever survives, but I think they're still in the better part there. Next, we're going to talk about the Snake Swarms. Now, this is a unit I personally think has no point being in special. This should be the 3rd option for the Saurian Ancients core units. They're okay. I mean, you take two bases of them for 110 points. They're strength 2, toughness 2, 5 wounds and 5 attacks, which is nice. They can scout for 10 points extra a model, and they're swarms. But the big thing I like is the Venomous Tide. If an enemy unit is in base-to-base contact with them, all attacks made against that unit is poisoned. So it certainly can help. I throw it into the side of a big unit while my Saurus are there, just absolutely kicking out a ridiculous number of attacks, and it comes out well in my experience. So I like them. I don't know that I've played them as a scout a couple of times, but I'm in general not a fan. So that's the end of the Taurus special unit. So they have a total of 4 units. Of those, I would definitely say the Caimans are the big winners there, in my opinion. Probably the Temple Guard coming in second, just because they do a decent job at what they're designed for. They're just not very flexible, in my opinion. And the Snake Swarms should absolutely be in core, but that's my argument. Okay, so next we get into the Skink Hunters, and this is the infamous Skink Swarm, which doesn't really seem to be possible given the limitations on the Jungle Gorillas section, which is 30% now. And you can only have 2 units of Skink Hunters in the army now, because apparently the rules team has been bad touched by skinks in the past, and they're not going to let that happen again. But yeah, this is basically where you get your poison shooting. You can start it up to 5 models and get up to 15. It's short range poison shooting, great for taking out low armored, high toughness targets. And they're skirmishers, so you get a lot of use for them in terms of chaff. I'll be honest, with the limitations that have been placed on it since I started playing 9th Age, I've really taken them a lot less. I'll take them mainly in small units just to either round out points or to use as chaff, pretty much. Just because without being able to take enough units, I don't think they're very good. But again, this is maybe me coming at this army from absolutely the wrong point of view, because I apparently am the only one who doesn't take them. So take that for what you will. I should have thrown the caveat in at the beginning of this recording that I don't know that anybody should actually trust my tactical advice, but it is what it is. But I do play with them occasionally just because I like the way I painted mine. And the bigger problem for me is because I built them all to be skirmishers way back when, they don't rank up well, so it's hard to use them as Braves. I think I've got 40 skinks, and I can only rank up about 18 of them, which is a shame, but... Okay, so then we go into the Chameleons, which are basically like your Skink Hunters Plus. You can have 2 units of these as well, although I only have 5 of them, because these are the old models, and I just can't find any more like this. But they're blowpipes, they're scouts, which is certainly good, and they have skirmishers and a hard target, so they're kind of hard to shoot back. So they're good for going after war machines and that sort of thing, in my opinion. And then my favorite choice for the weapon teams, although I guess I'm spoiling that a little earlier, are the weapon beasts. Sadly, they don't have little skink guys with them anymore, but pretty solid, 120 points. You can take up to 3 units, and each unit can have up to 2 models. You can either get the spearbacks, which don't increase the cost at all, and you can have up to 2 of them. They basically are your organ gun equivalent. The big difference is they're little critters, but they have to stand and shoot if possible, but don't take a -1 to hit. So it's pretty good. 2d6, armor piercing 1, strength 4 strikes. It's not terrible. Then for 30 points per unit, you can upgrade to Salamanders, which is basically a 12-inch flamethrower, which is, I find it nice. That's just me personally, mainly because I fight in my home groups a lot of like big units, so getting those extra fire breathing like D3s for every rank is kind of nice. Then the next 2 are going to be the flying cav. I'm just showing a picture of the Rampedon because I don't own any Pterodons. But your Pterodons is basically your flying fast cav. I talked a little bit about what they could do with the Alpha Rampedon or Alpha Paradon earlier. I'll be honest, I think they're too expensive for what I see them being able to do. If you've got a particular build for it, I could certainly see it. But for me personally, I don't think I get enough out of them. I would much rather go with the Rampedon Riders, which, while not great, I mean, you're not going to throw a unit of Rampedon Riders into anything big or like any big unit or armored unit and expect them to come out well. But I find them nice to hunt cavalry because of the lethal strike certainly helps. And war machines certainly, like I send them flying around to war machines. The big trick with them is because they're frenzied, you really have to be careful how you approach them and how you move them, because your opponent can very easily yank them out of position by taking advantage of the frenzy. The big thing I like about them is the prey scent. Basically, when you have a unit, one or more units of Rampedons on the board, you can drop tokens on 2 units. When the units are attacked by the Rampedons get to reroll to hit and have an additional D3 attacks per model that have to go into the unit. So against the mark unit, they can actually put out an awful lot of impact. And I have fun with that. So of those, Weapon Beasts are probably my favorite. And certainly the ones I use the most, just because the flamethrower thing is very, very helpful in dealing with a lot of the threats that I have to deal with here. So the last group is going to be the Thunder Lizards. And we're going to start with the daddy of them all, in my humble opinion, the Taurus Orb. This is actually the one model in my army that I wish I had more of. I only have the one that you see here. I'd love to get another one, because they're just so good. 450 points each. Like I said, I talked about the stats earlier. Just the ability to do those impact hits with the reroll on it, and the options you have for it. The thing is killer. The only downside I see, they are stubborn, which is awesome. Only downside I see is they're immune to psychology. So you got to be careful, because obviously you can't flee with them, and your opponent may be able to take advantage of that. But on the charge, the Taurus Orbs are amazing. And there's a lot of options, because you can go with the giant blowpipes, the great bow, the engines of the ancients. And the engine of the ancient has several different options for it. First of all, it radiates out a 5-up ward save, or it can make a particular spell lore easier to cast, or it can just throw out D3 metal shifting hits, which is super awesome. But it's a great option. Or if you want more sort of artillery style, you can go with the great bow or the giant blowpipe that it comes with. Certainly helpful. Definitely an awesome monster and an awesome model. Next is the Stygius Or, and this is one I'm so happy that they upgraded. I actually had the Stygius Or back from 8th edition Warhammer, and it was garbage. It was just awful. It would die every game, had no real impact on anything, and was just terrible. But they've upgraded it a lot. Being just a monster cav is kind of nice. It keeps the points down. You're looking at 330 points, and it's good impact. I mean, strength 5, tough 5, 5 wounds, 4 attacks, poison attacks, D3 stomp. The breath weapon I love. It's a toxic attack breath weapon. Can really rock some small knight units. And the predatory roar lets it roar once per game, and then everything within 12 inches of it, with the Born Predator rule, gains hatred for a turn, which is awesome. Then if you upgrade the Skink riding on it to a champion for 120 points, you get Swarm of Insects and Awaken a Beast from Shamanism. And though I mean, Swarm of Insects can be good, I don't get as much use of that as the surprise +1 strength or toughness buff when I need it. And so I think that's super awesome. Very, very happy with the Stygius Or upgrade. Last option is the Thyriscutus, 250 points, and this is, I guess for lack of better terms, this is the buff wagon of the Saurians. You can take it with either the Sun Engine, as you see here, for free, which gives all friendly units within 6 inches of it +1 weapon skill. Also gives it Pyroclastic Flow, which is good. More fire damage is never a bad thing. The other one for 30 extra points, you can take the Altar of the Snake God, which gives friendly units within 6 inches of it poison attacks in close combat. If they already have poison attacks, it upgrades to a 5-up poison instead of 6-up. And the Altar of the Snake God can cast the Stars of Lion from Divination. It's hard to wound. I mean, it's tough 5, but it's got 2-up armor, which is good. But it's not really a combat monster. It's only got 3 attacks, or you can trade that out for the Crush attack special thing. And it's got 4 skinks on the back for Poison Javelin action for a little more shooting. This is, from what I can gather, probably the least popular of the monsters. Which I can understand why. It certainly doesn't bring as much to the board as the Taurus Ors do, so it's certainly a poor cousin to the monster world. I kind of like them, but then again, I play more of a solid block infantry style with my big Blockosaurus, and so that bonus to the weapon skill actually helps. And having extra pyromancy spells is never a bad thing. I definitely think it's like the least good of the 3 monsters, but it's going to be hard with just the power that the Taurus Orb brings and the kind of bag of tricks that the Stygius Or brings to really match up to those. So one of them has got to be the worst, and it just gets to be this guy. So kind of closing thoughts in general. I definitely like the Saurian Ancients. It's interesting to me because there seems to be a lot of different builds. You can go with the Monster Mash style. You can go with a heavy infantry style. There's still some folks who do like the small number of bodies and go for the Skink Cloud-esque thing. I certainly think I'm going to lean towards a more heavy, more bodies kind of style. But the big question I find myself asking after looking all this is, do I take a Quaddle or not? That seems to be the big kind of difference between a lot of the lists I put together. If I do take a Quaddle, there's a lot of options. You can go with full pyromancy. Well, we'll talk about the lores in the next video. But there's a lot of options you can do, and you can build your army to be around that. And with the cost that the Quaddle Lord is, you basically have to. You're sinking a lot of points in a 4,500 point game into a single magic character. So there's a lot to go wrong. First, you have to build your army to take advantage of the magic. Then you've got to make sure you're getting it off on the turns you need it. And that's not really guaranteed with the number of sort of checkpoints that the magic phase has right now, in terms of you don't know if you're going to get the right spells randomly. You don't know how your winds of magic is going to turn out. You don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of questions there that can change it up. My other thought, if I don't take Quaddle, I would be taking the veteran the warlord on the Carnosaur, which is super awesome. Definitely a lot of impact there, a lot of strength, and builds towards the more combat-oriented style I like going. Downside of that is, again, it's a lot of points. I mean, you're looking at 900 points plus in a single model. One cannon is going to ruin his day, and that's going to be about it. So it is one of those, it seems like regardless of which way you choose to build the Saurians, there is going to be a single kind of point of weakness. So the idea is how you build the rest of the army to take advantage of and protect that weakness. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. I know it's not necessarily as in-depth as some of the other ones that you have seen probably, but the idea is to just kind of talk general thoughts from somebody who's not a super hard number cruncher. For those of you who may be interested in the Saurians, hopefully this at least sparks some interest. And if you have any questions, leave them down below. If you have any suggestions, given kind of what I've been talking about in terms of what I might want to try for a Saurians list, absolutely. I will take whatever suggestions I get. And other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will catch you on the next one.